Nick was a smart and brave boy, and the only thing he was afraid of was darkness. In the evenings, Nick, the space pioneer, and Nick, the great Jedi, suddenly turned into Nick. On. At first, his parents tried to explain to their little son that there was nothing terrible about darkness. Alas, everything was in vain. Nick listened attentively and agreed with the explanations. However, as soon as the door closed behind his mother and father, all their solid arguments disappeared somewhere, and the boy ran after them screaming in fear. Then his parents decided to pretend to be afraid just like Nick. They began to hide together under the blankets and tremble. The plan backfired because it only worsened Nick's fear. How come? Are Mum and Dad also frightened? That means everything is much worse than I expected, he thought. They even took Nick to the doctor. So, what are you afraid of in the dark, Nicholas? Asked the doctor. I don't know, confessed Nick. If only I knew for sure that there was no one there. But you never know what awaits you in the dark. The words seemed to burst out on their own, and Nick himself was astonished to hear his voice. However, he did not stop feeling scared. Finally, his mum and dad exhausted all their ideas for teaching their son to sleep in the dark. They just began to leave a nightlight on in his room. Nick would lie in his bed and look around the room. The warm, soft light of the lamp displayed the usual outlines: a table, a chair in the shape of a frog, a sports complex, construction kits. Everything was so familiar and cozy, absolutely no fear. However, somewhere deep inside the boy knew that someday he would have to confront the dark, and then it would be scary. At that point, Nick closed his eyes tight and ordered himself not to think about it. In the end, he fell asleep until morning, and in the morning, all fears were completely forgotten. It should be mentioned that besides Nick and his parents, there was one other member in his small family. It was a huge tomcat called Klaus. Klaus was quite an old and very handsome cat. He had fluffy black fur, white socks, and a collar round his neck. Klaus's eyes were just incredible. Nick even called them moons because they were so huge, yellow, and stunningly shiny. They seemed to see right through him. When the cat looked at the boy, the latter could not avert his gaze for a long time. It was so interesting to examine the two amber spheres with thin slits of pupils. Nick always thought that there was something else hidden in those eyes that he could not understand. Klaus had lived with them for a while, since summer, and the whole family loved him. Mum often said, I just can't imagine how we lived without Klaus before. Every night before getting away from the room, Klaus watched Nick closely, and there was a puzzled expression written on his furry snout. Nick sometimes tried to take him to bed, to stay with a friend through the night. Not so scary, isn't it? But Klaus stubbornly slipped out of Nick's arms and vanished. Nick thought it was because Klaus knew what was hidden in the dark and was afraid as well. One evening, Mum and Dad kissed their son goodnight, turned the lamp on, and left the room. Nick lay in bed and was almost asleep when suddenly he heard a soft, low voice. "Hello, Nicholas." With a wince, Nick sat up on his bed at once. It was his cat Klaus who stood near him silently and stared intently into his eyes. "Yes, it's me." Nick gazed at the cat, shocked. "So, you can speak?" "Of course I can. All cats know how to talk. It is just people who do not want to listen to them. And why do I hear you? Because I want to help you. Tell me, why are you so afraid of the darkness?" "I don't know. Probably I'm afraid of something that I cannot see. When there is a light, everything is clear and understandable, but the darkness holds something unknown and terrible. That's why I came to help you. I've been thinking how to do it for a long time. It seems now that I finally have the solution. First, listen. We cats are the creatures of the Queen of the Night. As you know, we see in the dark as well as during the day. The Queen of the Night herself gave us this ability, having scattered the moonlight into our eyes. So we love the night and the darkness because it is our special time. Today, I've asked my Queen to give you a magic gift, the moon sight. Tonight, you'll be able to see in the dark, and then it won't be so scary a bit. Do you want it?" The cat looked at the boy attentively. "Klaus, will you be there with me? I'm already feeling a little scared." "I will. Moreover, if you overcome your fear, I will show you a lot of interesting things. Go ahead, my boy. You have only one chance. This opportunity is given once in a lifetime." "All right, I'm ready," Nick answered after a moment's consideration. "Then close your eyes tight and turn off the lights. You'll see, everything will be fine." Nick was scared to turn off the nice and familiar nightlight and stay in total darkness even with his eyes closed. But the opportunity to see the night was tempting, and Klaus was close by. Nick squeezed his eyes shut and quickly pressed the light button off. "So, how are you, Nicholas? Open your eyes." Nick slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He really could see in the dark. It was so unusual that at first he did not even realize that the room seemed to be lit by a strange milky moonlight. This light snapped out the usual outlines: a table, a chair in the shape of a frog, sports complex, construction kits. No fear at all. "So I met you, the darkness," thought the boy. "Let's go," Klaus whispered to Nick. They walked around the apartment, peering into the darkest corners, in the closets, under the bed, behind the gas cooker. Nick looked everywhere with his magical vision and saw that everything was just the same as during the day. The soft moonlight illuminated the objects in a slightly different way, making them more rounded and smooth. Nick began to have so much fun and was so pleased with himself. "So that's what you are, darkness. You should not have frightened me with your black shadows. In fact, there is no you at all." The boy started leaping in joy on one leg. "At last," Klaus purred with pleasure. "You realize the most important thing. Darkness does not even exist. It's you people who thought it does. And now, come with me. I'll show you the promised gift." Nick, still in his pajamas, stepped out with Klaus. Having slipped out through an attic window on the roof, the two friends sat down and looked upwards. The night sky was velvety black. Here and there, golden stars shimmered from behind the shadows of the clouds. Suddenly, Nick saw a ghostly chariot moving slowly across the sky, drawn by grey horses with silver manes. This magnificent sight took the boy's breath away. A beautiful woman stood in the chariot with a sceptre in her hand. At the end of the sceptre, a disk of the moon shone softly. The Queen of the Night! The woman turned and smiled at the boy and the cat. Nick felt so warm and comfortable, as if his mother's hands were cradling him like a baby. "What a beautiful night," said Nicholas, and suddenly realized that it was the bright morning sunlight that shone right into his eyes. To his surprise, the boy discovered that he was in his own bed, and it was a new day. The sun rays poured in through the window.
Это созвездие называется Большая Медведица. Оно похоже на большой ковш с ручкой.
Ух ты!
"Klaus, Klaus, where are you?" called Nick. A black and white cat walked lazily into the room, looking sleepy. He stared at the boy with that inquiring look of his. Nick did not have time to say anything because his mum entered the room. "Good morning, Nick. Have you turned off the nightlight by yourself?" Mum could not believe her own eyes. "Yes, Mum, I'm not afraid of the dark anymore." Nick jumped out of his bed, picked Klaus up in his arms, and started leaping with him around the room. The cat courageously endured this torture. When it looked like Nick was going to repeat it, Klaus ran away. All day long, Nick sat thinking if his adventure in the night had been for real, or if he had only dreamt a beautiful and unusual dream. He spent a lot of time trying to talk to Klaus, asking him aloud and silently, but the cat did not bother to answer him. In the evening, Nick went to his room, quietly turned off the light, and lay down for a long time with his eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling. Then he turned over on his side, put his hand under the pillow to make himself comfortable, and suddenly found something small and hard. In surprise, the boy pulled out his hand and saw a small round stone. He turned on the light to look at it properly. It was a milky blue crystal, shimmering and shining gently from the inside. A moonstone. A barely audible voice spoke out. "Thank you, Queen of the Night," the boy whispered, and switched off the light. He held the crystal tightly in his palm.